everyone. Welcome to the fourth week of the Secure the Bag Book Club here on my YouTube channel. What Brooke Spent. I am Brooke Brown. I am your fearless leader, not like in a guru sense or like an expert sense, but more in I'm here to facilitate the conversation. So let's have that conversation. I'm really excited that you're here. We have been talking for the last month. If you've been following along or if you're new to the stream, welcome. We've been talking about the book, You Are an IP Company, and it is by Dr. Carrie Oberbrunner and Catherine Rubino Esquire. And the book talks all about, so the subtitle is The 12-Step Plan to Increase Your Intellectual Property Influence, Impact, and Income. So that is what the book is, kind of promising. And he had a really good TED Talk. Just to give a little background, he had a really good TED Talk about how his technology or his app, or I think it's an app, Instant IP. Not a plug, not an ad, and definitely not sponsored. But he uses this technology that uses blockchain technology to then timestamp a smart contract, which then kind of gives you that ability to kind of prove that you had a particular piece of intellectual property and you laid claim to it at a certain time that may have been before someone else. So there you go. That is kind of the background for the who of the book, or what the author's about. So a couple of things that I wanted to. First, if you're following the stream, not live, so after this broadcast, comment any of your responses, reactions, thoughts about the book as you're following along. Would love to have that discussion continue in the comment section. And just be able to kind of like throw out ideas of what are you considering to be some intellectual property that you might want to protect and use for later, income or things like that. So there you go. I am so excited because we are wrapping up the book in the last few chapters, and I wanted to share that I have thoughts, okay? So here's the thing. The last few chapters they talked about Disney, yes, that Disney, Lego, Dr. Pepper, Apple, and Magnolia, the Magnolia company with Chip and Joanna. You see them in Target, other places. You've seen them on, I think their show was Fixer Upper. There you go, on HGTV. And the remainder of the book kind of, it did a couple of things, right? So first, the first impression that I had of the latter part of the book was that we were kind of wrapping up. You could tell that they were like, okay, I don't really have too much more to share, but I did have some takeaways that I wanted to kind of share with you all. So one of the first takeaways that I thought about was, so it's not a takeaway, but it is an interesting backstory about Disney that I did not realize. It was some history that I did not realize, and they kind of touched on it in the book, but I thought they were really going to go in, and they did. They just certainly did not. But so Disney, the original Walt Disney, right, the designer, the man, the myth, the legend. He, in the book, they talk about how, Disney designed this first cartoon, and then the company that he was designing it for later got rights to the intellectual property, completely left him out of the deal, and he got nothing for it. He got no rights, he got no protections, he got no compensation, nothing, right? Well, Disney then learned their lesson, or his lesson, and said, all right, never again. And he, ever since then, the next thing he ends up creating is Mickey Mouse. And he does the Mickey Mouse and Steamboat cartoon and all that good stuff. And he protects it with, copyrights, trademarks, all that good stuff. And then subsequent designs that Disney has that then becomes what we now understand to be this humongous empire. The bedrock of Disney as a thing is their intellectual property. And it is because what they have managed to do is to have this strategy where they don't just create, creative works. They then profit off those creative works through the licensing and the reproduction and the merchandising and all that good stuff of their intellectual property. So they can use it over and over again without worrying about competition. There's not going to be, 5 different variations of Cinderella. I mean, they can take the plot, but they can't take, the designs. They can't reference anything that's protected by Disney. So then what ends up happening, so not copyright, is it trademarks? Sure. Anyways, intellectual property law, right, stated at the time that it was okay, you can have a copyright or you can have a trademark for 20 years, right? This is at the time. And Disney put money behind and put, legal power behind petitioning the government to extend these, protections. It's all right. So then, people that would be competitors of Disney, once their intellectual property rights ran out in those 20 years, now have to wait 150 years before it can actually run out. And I think it was in 2024 or 2023, something like that, that their first, that Mickey Mouse design officially ran out and became, public domain. So imagine what you can do with your intellectual property when you don't have any competitors like Disney because you have protected it, right? So that I thought was profound. I mean, one could say also exploitative. I don't know, but I mean, not exploitative, but kind of a little I don't know, just it can be a little ick, but but there's that. Hey, whoever is joining us on the live stream, this is just a quick announcement that I can't see who's tuning in unless you chat live in the chat. So please go ahead and share any of your thoughts as I'm rambling along. I definitely want this to be a dialogue, not a lecture. So, yeah. So then, the next thing I wanted to cover was on page 146, which is in the chapter. Oh, we're still in the Disney is an IP company chapter. So it talked about IP holding companies. Now, this might be a little advanced for our purposes, but it's something to consider. And one thing I will say about thinking about acquiring assets, thinking about protecting your intellectual property, all that good stuff, you want to be proactive. You don't want to be reactive in a lot of this, right? You don't want to have to get to the point where you're like, okay, now I got to get legal representation so that I can react to someone stealing my intellectual property and using it without my permission or in a way that I don't find particularly savory. But in the part in page 146 where it talks about having an IP holding company, which essentially is a special purpose business entity where a business can hold their intellectual property assets, right? So it talked about there being 3 unique benefits. One being transparency. It says the holding company can help attract investors or secure additional funding by providing transparency around the business's revenue generating assets. That's one thing. The second thing is tax efficiency. The holding company may be able to create more efficient tax structures by accruing for IP-related profits in a more favorable tax jurisdiction. So, you might do some of your business in Florida, and they said, oh, Delaware doesn't have any, I don't know, business tax. I don't know. I'm just throwing out words. I don't know if that's true. But, you can then take your, IP holding company to Delaware and do business in Delaware, and suddenly, you have some tax advantages. So that is something that is something to consider. And then the last thing is monetization. The holding company can license the IP back to the operating company, which produces goods or services. So there you go. There is a way of structuring your legal and tax and all that kind of the business entity in a separate way, so that you can then take advantage of certain benefits. So there you go. So I thought that was pretty cool to kind of go over, and it really didn't really go over much with that, but I mean it kind of wets your whistle. So there you go. Then on page 148, it talked about 3 stages of business, one being the startup stage, the next one being growth stage, and the third being exit stage. And it talked about how in the different stages, there's advantages to having these IP assets. One, in the startup phase, it talked about how 58% of venture capital went to startups with patents or with patent applications. So more than half of startups attract funding sources because of the fact that they have these kind of intellectual property assets. And then in the growth stage, it said that between 2011 and 2020, deal sizes for patent startups were 40% to 60% larger than those for non-patent startups in a given year. So again, there's that idea of like, if I'm looking to fund or invest in or do business with a company, having intellectual property makes you look pretty darn good. It looks you look like a sound investment, or you at least look like one that has the potential to grow because of your IP. And then in the exit stage, it also talked about in mergers and acquisitions how that IP can be part of that strategy. So there you go. That was the Disney chapter. And then let me see. I'm trying to find the other page. Hold on. There's a bunch of charts, and okay, going back to the name of the book, the 12-step plan to increase your intellectual property. Said with love. The steps, they did not do a good job in this book of like really walking you through how to successfully complete these steps. They gave you charts and they gave you examples of how to fill out the chart, but it really was kind of like a bam, here's a chart. We've done our job. And it was like, have you? So that was just my impression. Y'all can tell me different. But in the Lego chapter, it did talk about maximizing your potential with competitors, clients, and collaborators. I didn't find much value in that, but I mean, sure, right? I think what will help with using these charts is that if you're just really trying to like get your wheels turning and get some inspiration, referencing them, can be helpful. But they're not the end all be all of like trying to organize your intellectual property. Let me just say that. In the chapter, Caitlin says, I agree. See, you feel me? Anyway, Apple, oh yes, in the chapter, Apple is an IP company, which again, like the chapter is called Apple, hello. You would think that there'd be more to the chapter, but it really was just more of the same. I digress. There was a takeaway, and I have it for you. On page 189, they ask 3 questions. This is under the heading Going Global with IP Strategy. Now, here's the thing, again, going back to my point earlier about being proactive versus reactive, right? When we're considering protecting our IP, we're thinking big, right? We're not thinking small, we're not just saying like, oh, I just hope nobody, if it's not too much trouble, can you pay me a little bit something for this? Or, oh, if it's not too much trouble, I want you to, cease and desist using my name. No, we're thinking about like, when our brand, our company, our product is our technology, our app, our design, whatever, is a global juggernaut. And when we're thinking about that, right, on the page 189, it says, when strategizing about your own global protection, it's important to ask yourself a few questions. Here's the questions. 1, what are the largest markets for my goods or services? 2, where might my product be manufactured? 3, are there specific markets I aim to enter down the road? So again, we're thinking long term. We're thinking like, okay, I may be in, the t-shirt selling business, but one day I'm going to have, frozen foods in all the grocery stores, and I need to protect that. So then you consider, your IP strategy that way, not to overwhelm you, not to make you, feel like you gotta like throw thousands of dollars towards, IP protection of a what if, right? Especially if you're not sure of the value of, your IP just yet. I personally, this isn't, now, let me say, this is my opinion. This is not legal advice. This is not investment advice. None of that. Okay. But what I would do is I would, do the bare minimum protection. So like a copyright that's like $350 to $500 investment, or a trademark that's about $3,000 or whatever, and go from there. And then as you grow in the breadth and depth of your product or service offerings, and branding and all that good stuff, then you can do a little bit more. But I think that is the point that I'm trying to establish with this book club, because it is a beginner investment book club. So we are beginners here. And what I want to emphasize is that, we may, have $200 to $500, extra a month to consider, buying an asset of any kind. And as we learn about these different assets and how to acquire them, we may not go out and buy a franchise, tomorrow, but we now have the knowledge, we have the education to then go ahead and consider like, okay, I think I might, save $20,000 in the next, 5 years so that I can open a Chick-fil-A franchise, or, whatever the thing might be that you're, aspiring towards. And I want to make a point after this moment to talk about the next book. So give me a second and I'll just wrap this right on up. But in the chat, if you have anything that you wanted to comment about this book, go ahead and let me know. Would love to hear your thoughts and opinions about the book. As other people, view the stream, tomorrow, 2 months from now, I want them to know that we were really engaging and we were really talking about some important things here, and that people were inspired by the books that we're reading. So there you go. The last thing is that it has an appendix. There you go. So it has an appendix, and frankly, the appendix went into some pretty good stuff that I was like, why didn't you talk about this in the book? Hello. But I think it's because the book was meant to sell the app, not to really get you thinking about like acquiring IP in terms of like buying IP from a business that already has IP. That's a thing, right? I really thought they were going to touch on it, and they didn't, except in the appendix. So it talked about patent brokers and some companies that do sell they assist in the sale of intellectual assets. And then patent auctions is a thing. IP valuation firms. They had all these resources in the back of the book. So if you get the copy of the book, you can look through those resources as well. And that completes the book. Now, last thing is I wanted to announce, yay, that the next book that we are going to be talking about, I took inspiration from one of our club members. She reached out and was like, I'd really love to learn about how to buy art. Yes, like fine art, contemporary art, all that good stuff. We are learning about how to acquire art, which I think is a really nice segue from IP, because IP is accessible as well as art from local artists, from auctions, all that good stuff. And I would just really love to talk about the subject. So the next book that we are going to be doing for the month of November, starting November 5th on our next stream, so we're still streaming on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The book that we're going to cover is The Art of Buying Art: How to Evaluate and Buy Art Like a Professional Collector. And it is a book from 2019, and it is by Alan Bamberger. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And it is available on streaming services. Matter of fact, I'm going to leave a link in the description to a Spotify playlist where I am collecting the audiobook versions of all the books that we cover in the Secure the Bag Book Club, so that you can conveniently, if you have a Spotify membership, or just if you don't, you can listen to it on wherever. And yeah, it is my goal to find reads that are available, that are available on a number of services. So not just buying the book from Amazon, but also borrowing it from your public library, or listening to it on places like Audible, Hoopla, where else? Spotify, all those good places. So yay. Caitlin said, yes, no Ross and Michaels and Home Goods art for me. Listen, Caitlin understands, okay, that we are trying to buy real assets, not the imposters, not the frauds. So I'm excited for this next topic. Can't wait to talk about it next week. And again, leave me comments what you're considering about intellectual property, or what you're excited about for the next read. And I will see you all on the next stream. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care.